Hey dads, welcome to Father Friend, a podcast for dads who want to lean in, lead well, and love big. I'm Dr. Mike Ayers. Today's episode is a special one to me, not just because it's the first interview of the Father Friend podcast, not just because of who my guest is, but because of the story we share. Author of the New York Times bestselling Jericho Quinn and Arliss Cutter series, Marc Cameron's short stories have appeared in the Saturday Evening Post and Boys Life magazine. In late 2016, he was chosen to continue the Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan campus thriller series, beginning with the book Power and Empire. His seventh book for the estate, Command and Control, was released in November 2023. Cameron is a retired Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal who spent nearly 30 years in law enforcement. He holds a second-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu and is a certified scuba diver and man-tracking instructor. Originally from Texas, Cameron is an avid sailor and adventure motorcyclist. Cameron and his wife Victoria live in Alaska. They have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. But long before all that, he was just my buddy Mark. Back in Weatherford, Texas, we went to high school together and shared a whole lot of laughs along the way. I'm very happy he's honored me today by being my first guest interview on the Father Friend podcast. Mark, my friend, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mike. It's so good to hear your voice.
It's good to hear yours too. And we were able to catch up a little bit before we began the podcast, which was a special treat. So listen, tell us first of all what you're currently doing. You know, what's going on with you right now, books, writing, career.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate that I've been able to have 2 of my dream careers in my life. And I started, as you know, I started in law enforcement right out of school and worked as a Weatherford police officer there where we grew up, and then spent about 22 years with the Marshal Service. And then overlapping that, I was writing books, and the Department of Justice kind of got grouchy about me starting to make a little money off the books. And so right when I turned 50, I retired and to write full time. I've been retired now for 13 years and writing full time. But I have to say, people will come to me and say, "Man, you're a New York Times bestselling author. That's got to be the dream job." And I'll say, it really is. But the best job in the world was when I was a deputy U.S. Marshal. I love the mission. I love the people. There's not a day that goes by that I don't miss it. But I also am very thankful that I get to write full time. And I've been writing full time for 20 years, or not full time, but writing and making money at it for 20 years and full time for 13. So I'm very fortunate, extremely blessed.
You've been very successful. People will say that to those who have achieved some measure of success. They'll say, "Hey, I want to do what you do." But what they don't realize, or what the reply should be, is, "Yeah, but do you want to do what I did to get?"
Yeah.
Because it's often a long road that people don't really understand. Of course, you've paid your dues, and all of that set you up for the success that you're enjoying right now.
No, I'm very, very fortunate. I remember coming back we were deadheading back from a prisoner trip somewhere. I can't remember where we were, Seattle or somewhere else. And I was with another deputy, and I just started to make a little extra money writing on my off hours. And this deputy, who's a good friend of mine, he looked down at me at the airport, and we didn't have any prisoners anymore. It was just us going home, and I was writing. And he said, "Man, it must be nice. It must be nice to have this whole other gig, on the side." And I don't know how you do it. And I looked over at him. I said, "Because I don't play Angry Birds while we're sitting in the airport here. You got to do something else."
That's right. And, nobody thinks there's a big discipline. You told me earlier you're kind of under a deadline. There's a discipline to this, as with anything that you become good at. So good for you.
Yeah.
So
thanks.
Kind of turning the corner here to talk about being a dad. And that's what we're tapping into today, is just, a couple of veteran fathers here who are exchanging some of the joys and challenges of the fatherhood journey. But I saw recently the Facebook photo of your 3 kids walking arm in arm on a sidewalk. You posted that. You mentioned in the post how gratifying it is to see your kids be close. And boy, I could really identify with that. For a dad, there's just nothing better than for our kids to grow up not just loving each other as they're supposed to do, but liking each other. So tell us about your three kids. Where are they and what are they pursuing right now?
No, I like you. We love talking about our children, and so we've got three children. My oldest is an Air Force ophthalmologist. He Air Force Academy grad, went to grad school, went to be a Air Force OSI agent, which is what my whole first series was about, an Air Force OSI agent. So I kind of had some good inspiration there. But then when he was about 30, he decided to go back to medical school, and he convinced the Air Force to pay for it. So now he's an ophthalmologist and doing cataract surgeries and all that stuff right when I'm about at the age where I need all that stuff. So that's good. And he's got 5 children, and fortunately for us as grandparents, his first posting as a doc with the Air Force is here in Anchorage. So they live about 8 minutes from us. We see the grandkids all the time. They can ride their bikes over and get cookies from Nana and, that kind of thing. Our daughter, the middle child, she works for a utility company and a project manager for a utility company in Seattle. And her and her husband live in the mountains east of Seattle, kind of on the way to Stevens Pass for anybody that knows that area. And she's expecting her first child in October. So, and then our youngest he was an Anchorage police officer for a number of years. He quit that to transition into the United States State Department as a diplomat. He's a foreign service officer. He and his wife and son live in Virginia now while he's in training, and she's expecting their second child. So we're ready to start making the rounds, seeing new grandbabies.
Being at this stage of life, and of course, we talk about becoming a father friend to your children eventually, that as they reach into young adulthood, that you have this relationship with them, not just one of authority, but one of affection. And I think every dad wants that. And it's very gratifying to be at this stage with our kids, seeing them adulting, seeing them get married, have kids, struggle through the challenges of work and work life and all those things, and just being there for them. So I have 3 young adult children too, and I completely understand what you're talking about and the pride that you have with them becoming whole adults and who are functioning well and doing well. So you've had great success as a writer, but long before this stage were the early stages of fatherhood. So take us back. And of course, you were in the Marshal Service and policing at that point. But what did becoming a dad mean to you? I know for sure that we have a couple of expectant fathers who are listening to this. So can you remember what shifted in your heart when you first held your child?
Oh, absolutely. Our first son was born, the one that's the doctor now, was born when I was a rookie police officer. And this was family friendly leave. So once you burned up your leave or didn't have any, there was no paternity leave, or you couldn't even use sick leave to go be with your wife. If you didn't have annual leave, you worked. Mm-hmm. And so I remember my wife, she had preeclampsia. So we kind of a pregnancy diabetes thing, only during pregnancy, but she had kind of a rough go with all her pregnancies, and she was in the hospital, and I had to go to work because I was in training. Mm. So I'm a uniformed police officer, and my captain and my the assistant chief at the time was, kind of, this is the way it's done. Get back out there, go to work. So I'm riding around. My wife's in the hospital having a baby, and I'm trying to focus. I'm in training, which is one of the most horrible times of any police officer will tell you that field training is just awful. Really? I mean, a field training officer might take you to McDonald's and make you fill out an application and say, you're never going to make it as a cop. So you're in uniform, filling it out. They just play tricks on you. They're trying to get you ready so I'm dealing with that while I'm dealing with my wife going to have a baby. And the chief, he and I didn't see eye to eye on many, many things. But he came out of his office and he saw me sitting there doing a report, and he goes, "So what's Mark doing here? What's going on?" And he kind of reamed out the bosses and said, "Get him to the hospital." So even though he just gave me the rest of the day off, Now I came back to work right after that. I didn't get any more time off.
Right.
But holding that little child, and my goodness, it just changes. In fact, I just told my son-in-law, it rewires your brain.
Yes.
You start to think about, like, literally rewires your brain chemically. You just think about something else becomes more important than you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a powerful realization. The old saying is, as at every child's birth, or every first child's birth, a father is born. And that's really true. I remember that same experience, and just holding that little kid in a very emotional moment, saying, now I'm going to give this little boy my very best.
Well, yeah, you're right. No, I think you're right. That's a father is born. And what I was going to say is, it doesn't have to be biological. Our daughter, so we had a son, and then a son that also passed away in infancy, and then like a 5-year drought with no children. And my wife, she had miscarriages, and it just didn't look like it was going to happen. And we adopted a little girl through a friend of a friend. And we were fortunate enough to fly to Seattle and get her basically from the hospital. I mean, we just had her brand new. And I had the same feeling. It's not like it has to be blood of your blood and flesh of your flesh and all that. When I held that little girl, and then we actually had to give her back for 3 days over the Thanksgiving holiday to stay with because the courts and all of that. And she was born on our eldest son's birthday. So they're exactly 5 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
That same kind of, again, rewired. I had a 5-year-old son. We're buddies. Now I've got this little girl, completely rewired. I would have jumped off a cliff to save her.
Yeah. Yeah. We would lie down in traffic for our kids.
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about that. No question about that. Yeah. If it's okay, let's go ahead and transition. Let's talk about the trauma of the birth of the child that you and Victoria lost at birth. You and I share in a similar experience there. And you talk about the preciousness of fatherhood and life. Having an experience like that, it's life-defining in a sense of a loss of control, that you would give anything for the sake of your children, for the health of your children. And yet at that moment in time, you had no control, as I had no control. But talk to us a little bit about that and how that translated into maybe life with your other children.
Yeah, and I think I was listening to one of your other, or a couple of your other podcasts, and you talk about basically learning from mistakes, and we can go back and look at what we've done wrong. And actually, that was not one of my proudest moments, because I was pretty angry. I was angry with God. I felt, for the first time in my life, so that I would have been 25, maybe 26. I don't know, some mid-20s anyway. Ben, our oldest, was 2. I felt mortal. I felt vulnerable, but I hadn't been around death, and certainly not when it affected me and my wife. And of course, I'm a police officer at the time, so I'm seeing girls that are taking drugs and having babies and treating their bodies, with lots of alcohol and methamphetamine, and their babies seem, from the outside looking in, how come they get to have a quote unquote healthy baby? And my wife won't even take an aspirin when she's ill, and the baby is had a tumor in its mouth, and so he did not live, but he lived about 35 minutes, not strong enough. But what was really a lesson to me is, while I'm angry at everything and everybody, there was we lived on a little ranch kind of out Tin Top Road there by Weatherford at the time. And there was a family that lived up the street from us, and they lost a 2-year-old. It had like a sudden infant death thing. And while I'm angry and thinking about myself, my wife is up the street ministering to this lady about what it must be like, and getting outside herself. And it really gives me chills thinking about it, because I'd like to say I learned that lesson. I think I learned it over and over again from my bride, but the way she handled it and the way I handled it were 2 completely different ways. And I I tell that story all the time to my kids because we're all going to go through sorrow, and I want them to act more like mom than they do dad.
Yeah. I can completely relate. We had a child, and there was a diagnosis during a sonogram, so we knew ahead of time, and a condition called anencephaly, where the brain is not formed and the skull is not formed. It's a terminal defect. And so my wife carried the baby bravely for 8.5 months. About half those babies are born alive. About half of them die in the womb. And at about 8.5 months, he stopped moving. So we had a stillbirth at that point. And I remember praying and praying and praying and asking God to heal, to do some kind of miracle of some kind. And that didn't happen. And there was a greater miracle of work that he wanted to do. Our baby was taken care of by our perfect, loving Heavenly Father. But he wanted to do a greater work. And part of that was ministering to other people. And as I've shared that story over the years to people in church or other friends, I've come to understand some of the grief that they have had in their own lives. Grief, if you were to put it on a scale, which is not really fair to do, but grief that is much worse in terms of the trauma than even what we experienced. And yet they're walking forward. So it gave me a whole new appreciation. We had a healthy 9-pound, 5-ounce baby boy, the first birth, and then the second one came along. And I took things for granted, just like I had not been around death much. We had a healthy baby boy. I just assumed that this one would be. And boy, it was a strong, strong reminder of how precious life is and how precious the time with our kids are.
Absolutely. And, one of the things too that I learned and tried to emulate is how not only did my wife really help other people and minister and serve, the whole area of Weatherford and Parker County. Again, we were very young. I'm a police officer. That little boy who's buried in East Greenwood Cemetery, James Plowman, I don't remember James.
Yeah, I remember
donated the funeral services.
Another high school friend, yeah.
Oh yeah, and we were poor. I was making $6 and $6.50 an hour as a police officer, and so James Plowman donated the funeral services. There was probably, my goodness, 35 or 40 police cars in the procession to the grave. It just people, just overwhelming. It's like their baby, their child died as well.
Yeah.
And that, boy, sure lets you know who's got your back.
Yeah. Boy, in the middle of that heartbreak, we experienced the same thing of just loving community surrounding us. So let's turn a corner and talk about the practicalities of raising kids. And, back then you were not writing or not being employed as a writer. You had a tough job with demanding hours, some stress associated with it. How did you manage that tension of the demands of work and seeking to build a career along with having presence with your kids? You have any thoughts about that for young dads who are right there in that zone right now?
Yeah, that's a really good topic to talk about, I think. And again, I'm an extremely fallible individual, and I learn more from my errors. And my older son, I'm sure, has a much different memory of me as a father than my two younger kids, because there's that 5-year gap. And we always say with the older one we had time, with the younger ones we had money, but we didn't have much of either but in the beginning. But I learned a lot from my errors, I think. And I was still writing. When we got married, my wife, I told my wife I was going to be a theater professor and a novelist.
How about that?
And then because you and I were in plays together, and some of my happiest memories are My Fair Lady with you and that play in high school.
Yeah.
But I went to, I did theater in college as well, and met my wife that way. And then right before we got married, I called her, and kind of, as a phone on the wall in my mom and dad's kitchen, and I stretch the super long cord out on the back porch and agonizing about what I was gonna confess to my wife that I want to be a cop and a novelist. And she married me anyway. And we, she finished school and we went back to Weatherford, where I was got a job as a police officer. But that first year of marriage, somehow she cobbled together the money at $6.67 an hour to buy me a ballistic vest and a Smith Krone electric typewriter. And she said, "Now you do your thing." So part of my advice to people is always get a very supporting spouse, because she knew that was a dream of mine. At the same time, I had to make choices. This is a time where I have to prioritize the kids. I have to prioritize the family, and I don't think that I did as good a job of that as I should have early on. One of my saddest moments, I guess our oldest Ben was probably in the 7th grade. Now we used to do tons of stuff together. We had this 5-mile loop around our house. We'd run together. We camped. We did a lot of stuff together. But I was working on a story, and I don't even remember the story. I wasn't published yet, but I felt on the cusp. I'd been doing it a while. This was the one. It wasn't, but I felt like it was. And he came in and he goes, "Hey, Dad, you want it?" We lived in Idaho at the time, up by the Canadian border. And he came in and said, "Hey, Dad, you want to go out and do something?" Because we run and do all that stuff. "And you want to go outside and goof around, do something?" And I said, "No, I'm finishing this up. I can't get to it right now." And he never asked me again. From the 7th grade, and now he's 40, and we do stuff together now. But as a young kid, he never came to me after that. Said, "Let's go do stuff together."
Yeah,
we did stuff together, but it was always me. And I don't know that I even realized it. I'm sure I didn't realize it at the time, but I sure realized it a year or two later when I was like, something changed here because of my foolishness. Now at the same time, sometimes we do get busy. So my son's told me a million times, "Stop beating yourself up. Stop beating yourself up about that. That's fine." He says he doesn't remember it. I imagine he does. But fast forward, 20 years from that, and that same son is stationed in Japan with the Air Force as an OSI agent, and he's got a 5-year-old son, and I'm trying to meet a deadline. At this point, I am writing full time, and Jack, my oldest grandson, comes running around the corner in his stocking feet, and he slides to where I'm writing, and he looks at me and goes, "Papa, Papa, Papa, writing another book. Who'd have thought?" And then he turned around and walked away. So we made an agreement right there that if he would just come to me, and then later his little brother, if they would just come to me and say, "Papa, let us be men," then we would go do something manly, quote unquote. And so they could interrupt me. And I tell my kids, do that. In fact, to kind of encompass this whole chat we're having, the best advice that I could give any dad is, you call it father friend. I say, be a grandpa. Forget the, it's easy to say this, but the stressors about career and work and basically just having a body flooded with testosterone. You're trying to be the best you can. You got to protect, well, you still feel those things as a grandpa, but they're more tender. I cry way easier than I get teary-eyed way easier than I used to. And you can't make that happen. But if you can look at the things that make, basically the stuff that I sweated as a dad, those kids grew out of. They, you had one the other day about raising, about entitled kids, and that's important. That is really important. But most things, as long as you just have a set of rules and standards and follow them, kids, they're going to break the rules sometimes. They're going to bend things. They're going to, when I was the chief deputy, I try to make 2 parameters, like a roadway, and where I would give my deputies or my kids, quote unquote, marching orders, as long as they stayed within those boundaries, and they're pretty wide. As long as they stay within those boundaries, I'm not going to micromanage them. sometimes as fathers, we waste a lot of energy, like being offended. You did something that crossed me, and so I am personally offended rather than, and as grandfathers, we don't get offended. We're like, oh, you mouthed off? Well, you'll grow out of that pretty quick because some school kid's going to smack you back. And then when you respond that way with a little noogie on the head, the grandkid doesn't know what to do. That's just a long way of saying, my grandkids call me Papa, and just be a Papa. Just skip the angst of being the dad, and then you become what it's the same thing I think you're talking about, father friend. It's being a grandfather.
That's so true. And I just wish I knew then. Of course, everybody says this. I wish I knew then what I know now. And not just wish I knew, but wish I felt then what I felt now. Just so much angst about things that go away, that don't matter, and that in time will take care of themselves. That's why I'm trying to tell younger dads, hey, you just embrace the tension and not try to resolve it. Fatherhood is more of a tension to manage than a problem to solve. And just walk in that tension. It's both science and art. You have to work, and your job demands things of you. But you've also got to have a consciousness to see, my kids need me right now. And I got to set the phone down, close the laptop. And if it means delaying something at work, then in this moment, I need to do it. But those are hard to discern sometimes. Other times you've got to say, I've got to work right now. I can't do this. So, it's not easy, but I think in the end, there's a cumulative effect with our kids, with effort, with engagement, and with walking that tension where maybe there wasn't every moment that we could spend with them like they wanted, but in the end, they knew that we were giving them our very best. And when push came to shove, they would be the ones who would be chosen above really anything else.
No, that's really good. I like what you said about attention to manage, rather than a problem to solve. And I think kids do figure that out. I had a friend tell a story one time about being in a rafting trip on the Grand Canyon, or actually in the Arkansas River underneath the Royal Gorge, pretty wild river. And he was talking about the water was up, and he was talking about having his wife in the raft, and they kept hitting these rapids, and he was hanging on to his wife, trying to hold her in the raft, and they both kept falling out. Every time they'd hit rapids, he and his wife would fall out together. And finally, the river guide got him aside and said, "You have to take care of yourself, or you're never going to be able to keep your wife in the raft." And I think that's really important as fathers and husbands as well. We have to take care of ourselves so that we are there. And I had this discussion with at least probably dozens of younger deputies who are trying to manage this fatherhood, being a husband and being a present deputy at work and a present father at home. And they have to have a job, and that job's going to require them to travel. I mean, they knew that coming on as deputies, or if they're on a hot case, they've got to focus on it if they're going to take this bad guy off the street. The thing I think is to be there for your wife and kids every moment that you can.
Yeah.
So that they always know, if I have a choice, it's you. You are my choice. Because sometimes my youngest son was born while I was at the Marshals Academy. They pulled up in a golf cart next to we were on what they call a quote unquote fun run, like a 12-mile horrible run. And it's not so bad to run 12 miles, but when you're running in formation and singing cadence and all that it was fun. I look back on it, I would do it again in a minute. But that happened while my wife was pregnant, and they pulled up and said, "Hey, fall out. We're having a baby." They drove me. Everybody else ran on. They drove me back to our headquarters building there at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. Let me talk to my wife. Talked to her about 5 or 6 minutes. Saw she was okay. We had a new baby boy. And then when I hung up the phone, they said, "So you quitting?" And I said, "Well, I knew this was coming when I came down here. It's not a surprise to me, but I had to go. I mean, I'd waited 2.5 years for this, and it really blessed our family financially. And but I had to leave during the time that my wife was, and while I was gone, I should say another bit about my wife. She moved 2 young kids and a brand new baby from Weatherford to just south of Sherman, a little town called Howell, right along the interstate herself. When I got home from the academy 4 months later, I stepped into a new house with everything done. And so again, all you do is get a supportive spouse.
Yeah, you've got an amazing wife, that's for sure. You know, we talk about mistakes we have made. Going back to that, though, just one more thing, and I think this is really important for dads to hear. For your child to hear from a father, a man, I think it's unique with a father to say to a child, "I choose you, and I will and would choose you above almost every other priority, above anything else except for my faith in our good God and in my wife. I would choose you." That sends a powerful message to our kids that they take with them. I talk about emotional memory. And in the end, what kids will end up with, they won't remember what we said, but they will remember how we made them feel. And that whole thing of them knowing whether we were able to deliver every time like we wanted to, but them knowing that they are a priority to us, that's a strong, strong message. So in the midst of the chaos and the tension and the building of careers and the seeking to achieve and be somewhat successful, and in the effort to provide for your family, which is a big part of that, that we have some wins and losses. You're a humble guy. You've admitted some of those times when you didn't quite do what you wanted, but talk about one major win. Talk about the hope of that you had as a dad for the emotional memory that your kids would carry with them as adults now. As they think back about dad, what was the desire that you would have in their memory of you and your legacy?
Yeah, I think I want my kids still, I want my grandkids to, we have a saying in my family. I mean, it's the motto of lots of universities, and one of my characters in the book, the Latin is esse quam videre. It means to be rather than to seem. And I want my kids to know what I am, not what I seem to be. And I think that's a really important thing, especially in my job right now with my grandkids, because every time they see me out, I'm a personality. When they come to a book signing, to them, I'm Papa, but I'm also kind of gussied up, or they see me on Facebook, I'm, something else than what they see when they, the bald-headed Santa that they see coming over. And so I try to, even when they were young, when my kids were younger, I wanted to spend time with them. And for one thing, I always let them know, and you mentioned it here, that they were the most important thing, with the exception of their mom. We only had 2 corporal punishment sentences in my house. One was lying, and the other one was disrespecting their mother.
Yeah.
I remember my youngest came to me one day, and he was just not the type to disrespect his mother. And really none of them were. But he came to me one day and he said, he was little, like 3. And he said, "Dad, I don't want to lie to you, but I accidentally painted a giant smiley face on the garage with spray paint." And I said, "Okay, well, thanks for not lying." But so we set these standards, but then beyond them seeing that, what they saw every day, how I would protect their mom, or, whatever. I've really only been mad, truly mad, a couple of times in my life. And my wife jokes that I've got a really hard fuse to light, like really difficult, but it's only about, a millimeter long. So it burns down fast once it's lit. And both times have been when somebody threatened my wife. But but the kids see that you're a protector. I wanted them to see that I was the real me. And to do that, I had to find time to take them out individually. So I really can't think of a time, but I think the decision to take my oldest on pack trips where it was just him, he wasn't vying for time with his siblings, where we took horses into the Bob Marshall Wilderness, or, from there in Idaho, or going hunting together, or just out fishing together. And then doing the same thing with the other children as well. Yep. Going out with my daughter. She's, as I mentioned, getting ready to have her first child. And she remembers these little silly picnics we used to have where we'd take cheese and Ritz crackers and just go sit in the bushes and listen to her, just let her talk, where she got just time with me and the younger son as well. So I think that's probably, if I did anything at all right, it was scheduling time with each child individually. And incidentally, we still do that with our grandchildren. My wife is better at it than I am now, but she's more fun to be around. But we schedule time individually with the grandkids, and that's really important. So they have you, so they have your attention.
What a great insight! What a great gift, just to give our audience, just to say, to be, not to seem. We talk a lot about being present, because dads can be in the room but not be present, and be busy with activities alongside kids, but not really engaging them. So that's a great insight, and so many great insights today. So well said, my friend. Hey, Marc, before we wrap up, if you could say one thing to encourage the dad listening right now who feels tired, maybe even who feels like he's failing, what advice would you give him?
I think I mentioned to you, we were talking about the cold and the snow and everything here in Alaska and Montana and other places. And we go to an island in the South Pacific for a little bit every winter just to get away. We have many, it sounds kind of snooty when I say it, but we have friends there that give us what they call the mates rate. It's not as bad as it sounds financially, but spend a lot of time in the water, letting the ocean kind of wash over us. And I think as dads, we hit on a little bit earlier, we try to fix everything, try to solve every problem. And I think sometimes if we take that moment to let what we have wash over us, to let the fact that we have these wonderful children, to let the fact that, and actually as a papa, as a grandfather, I want to, what's the word? To be an example of that to my sons, especially, and my son-in-law, not so much the daughter and daughter-in-law. They're pretty good at it naturally. But I think to my son-in-law and my sons, let them take a deep breath, look around, and just let that wonder of being a dad wash over you, and just take some time. And I think, when I don't know if you're this way, Mike, but many, many times when I am in bed, asleep, or, just waking up or just going to sleep, the weight of the world just seems so much worse. It's like when you're horizontal, every problem just seems terrible. And then when I stand up, I go, why was I so worried about that? I think we can figure out how to do that as dads, that a lot of the angst that we have, if we just let this time with these beautiful kids, and honestly, to do that, I think is just to serve them, get outside ourselves.
Right.
Then look at these kids and say, what does that child need from me? Let's go do it.
Yeah. We talk so much, people our age talk about, man, the years pass so quickly. You've got to engage. You've got to be present. You've got to enjoy them, because they do. And of course, when we were young dads, people said that to us too. For some reason, we don't listen to that. We need to listen.
I know.
I'm hoping dads will really get a sense today that fatherhood is a beautiful, chaotic, but richly rewarding adventure, and you just don't skip through it. Just
enjoy embrace the chaos. Right?
That's right.
Embrace the chaos.
Embrace the chaos.
That's important. And I think kids today also, or from my experience anyway, they're pretty wise, and they have so much more at their fingertips than you and I did growing up. And my middle grandson, he's kind of the Joe Cool grandson. And they're all, I mean, I'm very fortunate to have such sharp grandchildren, but he was sitting talking to me one time at the dinner table, and just he and he said, "Hey, Papa, guess what? Dad was so busy that he couldn't come outside and play basketball with me. And I really wanted to play basketball. So you know what I did?" I said, "Well, what'd you do, Tom?" And he said, I just looked at him and I said, "Cats in the cradle and a silver spoon." And he started to cry, but he played basketball with me. So I think the kids they know how to get us.
It's funny.
To listen.
It's very funny that he, at his age, would even really know that song. That's great. That's right. Very smart. Well, good. So, Marc, tell us what can listeners look for on the shelves? What's coming up next for you?
Oh, thanks for asking. So I've got a new book in the Arliss Cutter series. It's called Deadline. It comes out next Tuesday, as a matter of fact. And it's kind of cool that we reconnected because, of course, these are murder mysteries and law enforcement. I mean, I'm retired deputy marshal. Arliss Cutter is the deputy marshal based in Alaska. But one of the threads that runs through all the books is Arliss's relationship with his grandfather, who's passed away at the time of the books, but he lives by he calls his grandfather Grumpy because he couldn't say grandpa as a little boy. And he also looked grumpy, and so does Arliss. But he lives by these grumpy rules, and most of them are just what we've been talking about. So honestly, you might read a future book and find some father-friend wisdom in there that I steal from you, because that's what we do. We remember all the cool things we heard and forget where we heard it so we can take the credit, right?
That's exactly right. Well, good. So I know our listeners will look forward to that. Many of them have probably read your books, and you just appreciate what you've done, who you are. And I appreciate that too. I watched your life over these years, and I told you this before. I deeply respect you, admire you, and it's really great for us to rejoin here and talk about fatherhood, because we haven't done that at this stage of our lives and being grandfathers, and how great it is. So for those who want to stay connected with you, how can they do that? If they want to follow your book releases, catch a signing, just keep up with what you're doing, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm not particularly active on social media, but I am on Marc Cameron author on Facebook, and then my personal Facebook is open as well. Just Marc Cameron. I have a website, just Marc Cameron Books. Just if anyone were to just type Marc Cameron into a search engine, sadly they would get a whole bunch of My Ugly Mug.
They would get a lot.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have a good readership, and I do enjoy hearing from folks, but mostly I enjoyed getting an email from my friend Mike, because I've been following you and listening to your wisdom for a lot of years. So this has been grand.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it very much. And again, this is our first podcast interview, and we would love to have you back at some point and talk about more things, dad related and grandfather related. So again, Marc's latest novel, Deadline, part of the Arliss Cutter Adventure series, is available now wherever books are sold. Don't miss it. Marc, thank you again, my friend, not just for your time, but again, for the way you live, your work, and your example to share with dads today, helping them to lean in, lead well, and love big.
Thank you, Mike. This has been phenomenal.
I'm Dr. Mike Ayers. We'll see you next time on the Father Friend Podcast. Thanks for listening today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with other dads. I'd love to hear from you. Email me at mikea@fatherfriend.net with comments, questions, and your biggest takeaways. For more tools, resources, and real talk on fatherhood, visit fatherfriend.net or follow on social media @ThinkingDads. See you next time.